Hello, welcome to our presentation today, which is about understanding Ayurvedic fertility, womb and hormone health. So the first thing that is necessary to do is to just get a really general understanding of some of the basic principles of how Ayurvedic medicine works. If you already have a pretty good idea about this and you understand about the doshas, please feel free to skip. But I'll quickly just go over a few things. So Ayurveda is based on an elemental system. It uses the elements to describe bodily functions. And it's assumed that because we were evolved from the earth, we also have those same elements within us. So for example, the fire in our bodies is also to do with transformation, just like it transforms things in nature. It is to do with metabolism of food, transformation of tissues in the body. It's present in the blood, the eyes, and the brain. So each element has its place in the body and describes bodily functions. We categorize these elements into the three dosha. And I will explain how these work a little bit more thoroughly in a minute. But it's important to note that the personalized approach for Ayurveda says that although we all have all of the doshas functioning different ways in the body, we tend to be born with predominance in 1, 2, or 3 of these doshas. So for example, for me, I'm dominant in the Vata dosha. That's going to mean certain things about my life. That's going to mean certain things about my personality, my health, my body, things I might be interested in, but also the disorders I'm most likely to suffer from, because essentially that cup is already very full. So I can easily take in more of that, and that's going to overflow before the others. So throughout our life, we obviously engage in lots of different activities. We eat different foods. And every time we do this, we're taking in new elements. Now, some of these elements will be really great for our body, really beneficial, and they will just correct the balance or maintain the balance that we were born with. However, a lot of the time we come into contact with elements that will affect the balance. So this is our Vikruti. So Prakruti is our birth state and Vikruti is the state that we're currently in. So when this affects our balance, that's when we start to feel it in our body or our mind. So we might get very anxious, we might feel fear or anger, we might feel that something is off with our skin, we might feel dryness or roughness or oiliness. Whatever it is, this is when a disorder presents itself. So it could be quite a deep disorder, it could be quite a superficial disorder, but that means that something's gone out of balance essentially in the body. So I'll just talk you through the three dosha. So the Vata dosha governs all of our movement. So it's made of air and ether. If we have a dominance in the Vata dosha, we tend to have a slimmer build, small facial features, sometimes with protruding nose, dry lips and skin, likely slightly darker coloured skin or olivey, bonier physique, curly or dry or finer hair, cold hands and feet, excitable, speaks fast, poor memory, curious, people-pleasing, loves to chat, creative, optimistic, loves to move and dance around, loves feeling free, does not like to be controlled, irregular appetite, obsessive, and easily emotional, disorganized and fast thinking. If we have a bit too much Vata in the system or the Vata is imbalanced, we might tend towards anxiety, dryness, coldness, insecurity, OCD, excessive movement. We have the Pitta dosha. So within the body that governs metabolism, transformation of tissue, cells and food. And it's comprised of fire and water. Pitta dosha tends to be more of a medium build, medium height, strong body. And as I said, you could be a mix of 2 of these or even all 3. Medium facial features, more likely to have lighter coloured eyes that are piercing, oilier, lighter hair, more likely to go grey or bald prematurely, Lighter skin with moles and freckles. So pitta is dominant in the pigmentation of the skin. It's in the blood, in the eyes. So if we have excessive pitta in the body, we might get redness in the eyes, we might get redness in the skin, etc. Generally organized, confident, intelligent, quick-witted, powerful, likes to take leadership, strong mental capacity for learning, ambitious, driven, efficient, high expectations, focused, visual appearance is very important to them, tends towards anger, jealousy, irritation, inflammation, heat, pain, and a need for control. So, kapha. So kapha in the body is kind of the building blocks of the body. It governs lubrication, moisture, building, reproduction, so very important with what we're talking about today, and stability in the body, made of earth and water. People who have more dominance in this dosha tend to have a wider frame, curvier physique, bigger features, thick, soft hair, thick, soft skin, blue brown eyes, cold hands, gain muscle easily, strong body generally, deeper, slow voice, tends to be gentle, kind, loyal, understanding, non-judgmental, guarded, sometimes slow to connect with others or trust someone new, measured, committed, slow pace, calm, quiet, not easily upset, good memory, tolerant, stable, organized, mothering or parenting, likes to be still and resting, good sleeper, generally strong immune system, loves food and eating. If we've got a bit of a kapha imbalance, we might tend towards a weight gain, a coldness, a swelling, water retention, depression, high cholesterol, being overprotective and potentially suffocating as well. So we will talk about the tissues of the body now, because this is quite relevant, especially when we talk about the reproductive tissue, because the sukradhatu, the reproductive tissue, is the very end tissue out of 7. So it takes a certain amount of time for all our nutrients to get to that tissue. So it's really relevant that we talk about the process of this and some of the other tissues involved in order to talk about reproductive health. So all the 7 tissues of the body do go through 3 stages. When we first digest our food, this is when the food has been properly digested. Some of the nutrients and element qualities go into our tissues one by one. When an element enters a tissue, if it is useful for the tissue, so if it is of a similar elemental quality, it is used and it creates a stable quality. So it might create some of the tissue or repair some of the tissue. If it is not useful, it will be passed to the next tissue in an unstable quality, and it might be used further down the line. A waste or a byproduct of each tissue will also be produced as it gets nourished. For example, the byproduct of our plasma and skin tissue is a phlegm-like substance. The byproduct of bone tissue is hair. So one way we can actually tell imbalance or blockage in a particular tissue is by looking at what the waste product is doing. For example, with the hair, when there is a problem within the bone tissue or a lack of nutrition going to the bones because of a blockage further upstream, we can get either an excessive growth of hair or we could have no hair. The byproduct of the reproductive organs, for example, is growth of the breasts, beard, or pubic hair. So all the areas affected when you first go through hormonal changes as a teenager. And these areas can therefore tell us something already about the likelihood of us potentially having low fertility or having really strong reproductive health. With kapha dominant individuals, they do tend to be better developed in those areas. So we can already associate with this with, oh, okay, they've got a lot of their kapha doshas, their kapha tissues in their body are really well nourished. So it's likely this nourishment has also made its way to the sukradhatu, which is kapha dominant, but we'll just discuss that a little bit more in a moment. So here we can see the 7 tissues. Now it takes around 28 to 35 days for nutrients to go through all the tissues. It's about the same as a moon cycle. It starts with the skin or plasma tissue, then travels through the blood, muscle, fat, bone, bone marrow, and then reproductive tissue, nourishing relevant tissues on its way. This is why the quality of our food may show up in our plasma or our skin tissue, and even maybe our blood tissue, quite soon after we have eaten, whereas it'll take quite a lot longer for us to feel the effects in our bone tissue or deep tissues like our reproductive tissue. This is why when we're talking about the reproductive tissue, the subcutaneous, disorders in this area can take the longest time to heal because it takes at least a month for anything we take in today to get to that place and make a real difference. It's also a complex area for disorder because some disorders in this area will come from a blockage or imbalance in the tissue itself, such as fibroids, that's an actual buildup in the tissue, in the subcutaneous. But other disorders may be more related to blockages in previous tissues. So we might have a blockage in the bone tissue or the fat tissue. Or it could be a overspill. So it could be one of the previous tissues, a blockage there, overspilling into the next tissue. If there is an imbalance in one of these tissues, so for example, if we have an imbalance within our fat tissue, we can see that fat, MEDAS, is influenced by kapha. Now, if we're very, very thin and we've lost a lot of weight recently, we might think that this could affect our reproductive tissue because it is also influenced by kapha. So though we can't necessarily see what's going on in our reproductive area, we can tell by the other tissues in our body that might be influenced by kapha that something might be going wrong, or maybe kapha is generally undernourished in the body. So we could see if we've got not very much muscle or fat development. We could see in the skin, we could see if we've maybe got very dry or oily skin, or the skin, something wrong with the skin, we've got a skin disorder. We can tell already that there might be something that has also happened within the reproductive tissue, since they're all kapha related. Same way, if these areas are really healthy looking, we're probably feeling like there's might be more of a likelihood that the reproductive tissue is also healthy. So if we do digest our food correctly, and all the tissues are nourished, there will be no blockages formed. Sometimes, however, even if we digest our food correctly, we're just taking in too much of a particular substance. So we might be nourishing the muscle tissue, or we might be really, really focusing on pitta foods, and we might have nourished the blood, but now, although the matter is digested, we've actually nourished the blood, we've sorted that out, but now we need these other things and we're not getting them through our diet, for example. So that's another way things can happen or imbalances can form, other than having undigested matter, so not nourishing our food. If we do not digest our food properly, this does create undigested matter. So if we take pitta, for example, if we have a lot of chili or tomatoes, these can accumulate in the rakta dhatu, to the blood tissue. So it's undigested, it's trying to get to the blood because it thinks it's kind of the same quality, but because it's undigested, it can't nourish the blood. So it's going to just hang around there and cause a problem. It's going to cause a blockage. There might be then issues further down. It might cause inflammatory conditions. If this then gets all the way down to here, it might cause endometriosis, things like that. It essentially replicates its quality in other tissues. So if it overspills into the muscle tissue, the pitta qualities of kind of sharpness, of pain, of inflammation might be replicated, and we might get those kind of sensations in the muscle. We must consider also what the vata dosha is doing and the role is, because it's governing movement. And actually this is very essential for good kind of reproductive health and good health of all our structures and tissues because it's governing the movement in between each one as well. So if there's a vata imbalance, this can be the cause of a blockage or a disorder. We can also look at specific reproductive health issues such as a lack of period or a very heavy period and polycystic ovary syndrome, because we have, in polycystic ovary syndrome, we have a overstimulation of vata in this area and an undernourishment of kapha, which make the egg move out of the ovaries before they are ready. And when there is any kind of vata buildup, we experience the vata qualities in this tissue, such as dryness, roughness, and coldness. And in the reproductive tissue, we need that to be moist. So any kind of dryness can kind of stop that working correctly as well. So that's just a really brief overview of that. Don't worry too much about that if that was a bit confusing. We will get on to kind of more in-depth things about what we can really do about these problems and what they might show up as in our body, depending on our constitution and the imbalance that it's suffering from. So here's the last 3 tissues in that list. Before the sucradatu, we have the majjadatu, which represents the bone marrow. The byproduct of this is a glaze in the eye. So we know this to be an attractive quality, and that's because it shows a strong working immune system, since the majjadatu is linked to this, and it indicates that that person probably has quite good fertility, because if this tissue is nourished and working, it's quite likely the next tissue is, which is the sucradatu. When all the tissues are nourished, 7 drops are created, and this is called ojas. Ojas supports our fulfillment and our mental well-being, our immunity, and after menopause, Ayurveda suggests that ojas travels to our brain and develops our wisdom, which I think is a lovely way to look at the menopause. It's also said that we share our ojas when we have sex, and this is one of the many reasons sex can feel like such a powerful act. We are literally sharing our essence with another person, and they're receiving some of ours. We're receiving some of theirs even. This can also be very healing. This can also be very harmful. Any blockages we have in our tissues can have an effect on our ojas, and that's why we're less likely to regularly have feelings of peace, fulfillment, and our immune system might be likely to be struggling when we have an illness or imbalance, because essentially those drops aren't able to properly form in the same way. Overly drying or heating foods can be particularly powerful in preventing proper function of the sucradatu and the development of ojas, because the sucradatu needs a cool and moist environment. So that's what we need. That doesn't necessarily translate to cold food, but we will look at that in a moment. Just a real quick look at the chakras, because the chakras are energy channels and they do relate to our endocrine system, so have a strong relationship with our hormone health. If we have an emotional blockage that translates to one or more of the chakras, this can have an effect on our fertility through affecting our hormonal state. We can also see here in the lower tissues, the elements that are replicated in the sucradatu. So we can see we've got earth and the water, so that they also are related to the bodily tissues. I mention this because if nothing else seems to have a positive effect on your fertility, or if you have an hormonal imbalance that's not really shifting, it may be that there's an emotional blockage linked to a chakra, which will need removing before we can move forward. It might not just be that you can eat the right foods or do the right things. There might be something deeper going on. This is really challenging work, but if you can find some support with this via Ayurvedic massage and mark-point therapy, or other types of emotional healing, of course, such as different types of therapy, different types of energy work, that can really help with this. And that might be something to look at if you're kind of at a loss for what's going on and you've tried everything else. So we'll move on to our menstrual cycle. Different doshas dominate the body at different times and are utilized in different ways. So during our cycle, each dosha comes up in its own time and does a particular job, essentially. So the vata dosha governs the movement, as we've said, so including the downward movement, which we call apana vayu. And this helps release the blood from the womb lining and out of the body. So anything kind of that's going wrong in that particular time is probably related to Vata. The Kapha dosha supports the growth of the egg. A lot of earth and water is required for this. And the Pitta dosha governs production and transformation of the womb lining, as it involves blood tissue, which is governed by Pitta. So that's why, you know, around the Vata phase, we might feel a little bit more teary. We might, or when we're actually on our period, we might even get quite creative. We might feel like we need to express ourselves or do dances or kind of sink inward and like be very soft and look after ourselves. In the Kapha phase, we tend to feel sort of more strong and capable. Our body is kind of feeling quite good, feeling quite strong. Our skin tends to be a bit better. Pitta phase, that's why we obviously feel a bit PMSy sometimes. We get irritable and angry. It's a bit more Pitta going on in the system. So we can kind of associate our periods with the doshas as well in terms of what we might be going through. So what our Vikruti is, what our Prakruti is. So if we're dominant or have an imbalance in these doshas, it's likely to affect our periods in correlation with the phase of the cycle that the dosha belongs to. So Vata dominant periods can differ in length and heaviness. Sometimes can fail to arrive or cause a lot of cramping and pain on arrival because it's trying to sort of push some stuff out, but it's we're not able to do that for some reason. There's a Vata imbalance there, or a movement imbalance. Might also be associated with kind of a dryness in the vagina, coldness or roughness. If someone is dominant in Pitta or has Pitta imbalance, they're more likely to have accurate periods time-wise, but struggle with PMS symptoms a little bit more, particularly associated with irritability and anger, since there is extra Pitta around at this time. Also might increase the flow of blood because more blood is accumulated during the womb lining phase. There may be a feeling of inflammation in this area as well, or heat. So we might get very, very hot at this time. Kapha dominant dosha tend not to have too many issues with periods generally. If there is an imbalance, this could lead to sort of a sluggishness or a heaviness or a sadness, lack of motivation during the Kapha phase of the month. So here are some ways of understanding if you may have a particular imbalance in the Sukradhatu. So if you do have a Vata type imbalance, obviously you might have kind of lack of or irregular menstrual blood. You might have a lot of cramping. You might have a feeling of kind of pins and needles, sensitivity in that area generally, a roughness, a dryness. You might have polycystic ovary syndrome. Obviously that's PCOS, not PCS. For Pitta, we may expect to feel a burning sensation or a sharp pain. There might be stronger smell, yellow discharge, clotted menstrual blood, or heavy flow. Also, endometriosis is associated with Pitta as well. So with polycystic ovary syndromes, we've got an overstimulation of Vata, understimulation of Kapha. So the egg hasn't grown fully, but it's kind of pushed out of the ovary into the tube. And then it just kind of stays there and becomes a cyst. Whereas in endometriosis, we've got kind of an excessive amount of womb lining that starts to come outside of the womb, causing a lot of pain and inflammation. With Kapha imbalances, we might see more kind of white-coloured phlegm-like secretions or mucus. There might also be a dissatisfaction during sex. Fibroids is also related to Kapha. Fibroids can occur due to a Kapha-related physical issue, but is often linked to an emotional issue around having children sometimes. So it could be a deep desire for children, the feeling of external pressure to have or not have children. Yeah, tends to be very kind of emotionally related. So as I've said before, you know, the importance of digestion is real. Correct digestion usually does mean we can avoid a lot of imbalance. So it's really important that we look at this first in terms of the healing process. If we don't digest our food correctly, undigested matter or ama is produced, and this circulates the channels and tissues, causing imbalance and blockage. good digestion is absolutely key to maintaining a healthy reproductive system. So treatment for balancing digestion may include Agni Deepana and Amaparchana. Agni Deepana kind of means to re-establish the healthy digestive fire, because very easily when we have an imbalance, our digestive fire can go up. So Tikshan Agni, it's too fast. We're kind of dispelling everything really quickly and it's not nourishing the body. It can go Manda Agni, very slow and sluggish. It can go Visham Agni, up and down. These are associated with different doshas generally. But we want to get it kind of into a place where it's feeling okay before we take in food. And we can actually do that with a couple of simple home remedies as well as Ayurvedic herbal medicine. So one way is to have some toasted cumin powder, half a teaspoon. And we mix that with half a teaspoon of honey or sugar or syrup. And you just take that twice a day before a meal. You can also try taking fresh ginger, lime juice, and a pinch of salt before or after a meal. Probably not for quite extreme pitta disorders, but for kapha and vata, that's fine. You can also try ajwan water, which is even appropriate while we're pregnant. So ajwan, you take some ajwan seeds, you take a tablespoon, you pop them in a pan with 5 cups of water. You boil that with the lid on for 15 minutes, and then you can take a tablespoon of that water each day, drain off the seeds, each day, twice a day before a meal. And I do have a much sort of deeper summary of digestion in terms of Ayurveda and how we can support our digestion system in the digestion webinar. So please do go and see that for more information. In Amaparchana, we do use Ayurvedic herbal medicine for this quite a lot. There are some other methods as well, which we'll come across. So what are we thinking for long-term Sukradhatu health? So as well as really good digestion, we do want to not have too much fluoride. This can affect hormone production. Tampon use can affect this. So using a pad or just making sure you're changing your tampon or moon cup very regularly is suggested. Long-term use of contraceptives. We know this kind of shuts down our normal hormone functions and signaling process, as well as shielding us from the realities of what's actually going on with our periods. So inevitably, this can lead to fertility issues and imbalances in this area. Incompatible foods. So this is things like eating fruit with other things, eating acidic foods with very alkaline foods such as fish and milk, eating different animal products in the same meal. You can actually look this up, look incompatible foods Ayurveda, and you get a really long list of these, but they're the ones I would concentrate most on. Also kind of long-term use of raw foods or very oily or dry foods can also inhibit proper function in the reproductive tissue because they can aggravate vata or pitta, causing dryness, causing heat, causing lack of or excessive movement and inflammatory conditions, all of which do go against the natural quality of the Sukradhatu, which is cool and wet. Foods to reduce if you do have vata or pitta imbalance affecting this area also include things like chili, mustard, vinegar, red wine, whiskey, tomatoes, chili, teas, coffee, excessively fried or salty foods, sour foods like lemon, orange, grapefruit, fermented foods, very rough or dry foods, kind of red meat, red fish, things like that, cheese, yeah, some cheese. And, you know, a couple of other little things would be excessive sex, as long as, you know, absolutely fine until you're feeling like a bit uncomfortable in that area, then it probably is gone a bit excessive and can start aggravating conditions in that area. Sadness or worries, extreme weight loss, daytime sleeping can affect it, horse riding, contamination or obstruction of that area. So we can start having a little look at remedies. So mung beans are a really, really cooling force. They're the most cooling pulse. So we do want this area to be nice and cool. So mung beans made with coconut, you can soak the mung beans overnight, get rid of that water, cook them again with some coconut milk, have them with some nice warming spices, gentle spices. So we don't want anything to heat up, but we just want to help the digestive process with warming spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, cardamom. We also notice some of these things are actually shaped like an oval or almost like a womb or a vagina. And usually those foods are really beneficial in this area. So we've got coriander seed, cardamom, a nutmeg, a date, all of these things are really beneficial. So you can make a sweet breakfast with that. You can also make a savory breakfast with kind of similar idea, but with things like coriander and cumin. I wouldn't go too near turmeric if you're trying to support your sucradatu health, because turmeric is actually inflammatory. The vipaka, the after digestive effect, is inflammation, even though on our skin it's anti-inflammatory. So no turmeric supplements, please. And rice is also lovely to have. You can have a rice porridge or a rice pudding, essentially. Some of these recipes, including that one, is in my ebook, along with lots of other non-aggravating recipes, which would be very good for reproductive health. That is just on my website in the course section as well. You can do a womb massage. They're really good, especially with mama points, get everything moving and stimulated. Oil in the vagina, I would only recommend under the advice of your practitioner. I usually use Miliardi for endometriosis and fibroids, and you can pop that onto a tampon and put it in for a little bit. Womb massage with mahuran and oil. Again, these things are for your practitioner to suggest to you. Very gentle exercises like yoga, but absolutely no kind of extreme cardio where you're losing a lot of sweat. I wouldn't recommend that in most fertility conditions, other than potentially fibroids, but again, that's a very complex one. Could be lots of emotions involved. So again, I would probably seek professional help in any of those conditions, so you get a really personalized support with that. Kapha foods, generally quite good, again, aside from potentially fibroids. So sweet, liquid, warm, wholesome foods. So keeping everything warm, really avoiding any salads, any raw foods, keeping things kind of naturally sweet foods are really great, liquidy, warm, wholesome foods. Here's some more specific remedies. I'll let you kind of take a picture of those as well, or just save them. So we've got the almond drink, very, very good for fertility, but also generally great for hormonal balance and menstrual health. Have a look at how to make that. Mung dal water, again, very good for pitta reduction, particularly great for endometriosis. Coriander water is one of these kind of remedies with an ama-parchana quality. So it takes out toxins or ama that are currently stuck in the system. I would recommend that to a lot of people. That's not going to hurt you. You could have this every day, every morning, not more than once a day. If you do get any cold symptoms, because it is quite cooling, you can just pop a little bit of fresh ginger in there and heat that up. Now, jello water is a specific one to increase or start blood flow. So if you don't have blood flow, or you have a lot of cramping and the blood isn't kind of moving, then you can definitely use that one, but only the week leading up to your period. And cumin water is kind of the opposite. So that's for excessive menstrual bleeding. So that will kind of calm everything down a little bit. I will talk about two specific herbs that we do use a lot in Ayurvedic medicine for fertility and hormonal health. However, I would really strongly suggest for you not to go out and buy these yourself. They do need to be prescribed to you from an Ayurvedic practitioner, because otherwise they might be wrong for your particular condition, and they are potent medicines. So that's really important to note. As you can see with Shatavari, it's a lovely thick root, so it makes you think of kapha. And it's because it's really great for building. It's really great for nourishing sukradhatu. It's very good for taking down pitta and vata disorders. It's great for breast milk. You can take it while you're pregnant. Not so good for fibroids, but yeah, pretty great for those other conditions. Very good for menopausal symptoms. Ashwagandha improves circulation. It's very good for men who are a bit struggling with a sperm quantity, or they're not getting an erection. Very, very good. Generally also quite good for menopause when taken with Shatavari. Can aggravate some vata conditions, so to be just really careful with. Just a quick note on menopause before we end. I would say that So for menopause, it's important to note that you've gone through your pitta phase of life, and menopause, all the pitta is trying to leave the body, and that's why we get really, really hot and agitated, and lots of heat disorders. So if you've got excess pitta at that time, you're going to get a really bad menopause. You might also get a bad menopause if you've got a vata imbalance that's trying to leave the body, and if those channels are obstructed, they can't get out. And when we have gone through the menopause, we then start to have more vata. So our whole constitution changes a little bit, and we need extra support at this time. And we actually might need to change what we're eating and what we're doing a little bit. So these particular times, especially great times to come to an Ayurvedic practitioner, because we work with this very successfully. We can reduce symptoms of the menopause quite easily through Ayurveda, and really support you in your journey into that kind of next chapter of your life. If you would like more information, there's the digestive webinar, there's the ebook, and there's some other courses as well. There will be more courses going up too over the next couple of weeks, all on my website. You can also email me. All the information is on my website, and don't hesitate to ask a question or book in for a consultation. Would love to see you. And yeah, thank you for coming.